assists, plus 6 rebounds, and the Celtics, a hard-fought 2-0 series lead. And up 2 games to none, BPI now gives the Celtics an 86% chance to win the series. Our model views Boston in 5 as the likeliest outcome as the series shifts to Indiana. And we shift to Sean Farnham, who joins the conversation again, as well as CeCe Sabathia. Before I get to CeCe, your biggest takeaway from last night's Celtics win?
Well, I'm going to tell you, it's the clutch points once again from Kyrie Irving. People forget because of his absence in the postseason that when he was with Cleveland and they knocked off Golden State, the clutch points came down the stretch from Kyrie. And we saw a little bit of that reemerge last night in the playoffs. And I think that's a big thing for him, confidence-wise, moving forward. And it's a statement for the Celtics as an organization.
CeCe, your thoughts on Kyrie Irving?
I think it's great. I'm happy for him. I think, throughout the year, he had some problems dealing with the media and dealing with different things. And I think he was just trying to get to these moments. He wanted, the big stage and, play for the Celtics in the playoffs. Didn't get that chance last year. And I think he's here now and he's embracing it.
You bring up a good point, because when you saw Kyrie, and of course it's a win in the playoffs, so it makes sense. But when you saw him at the podium yesterday after that win, he was smiling, he was energized. What have you seen from him, to CeCe's point?
Because it means something now. Like the regular season grind, you could tell war on him. He talked about the coaches and their game planning. He talked about the young players and their immaturity. But as the season progressed, he started to get a lot more serious. And all of those plays, if you notice, he went one-on-one. Yeah. And that's what ends up happening in the playoffs. Your best player has an opportunity to take over.
And CeCe, to the point you were making, we had this conversation a lot here this year, and in baseball, I think this might even be more the point. There is an expectation frequently that the best player becomes the leader. But what happens when the best player isn't really a natural leader? What happens in a clubhouse on a basketball team in those circumstances?
Then everybody else has to step up. I think within the team, the guys know that. And then everybody else steps up and you chip in and do little things to try to lead and not kind of overshadow the star, though.
It's complicated, right? Because
it's tough.
The media is going to come to the star regardless of those circumstances.
Well, and especially when you play for the Yankees or you play for the Celtics. Right? Look, if you're wearing the pinstripes or you're wearing Boston's colors, it just means a little bit more. You are the franchise of record when it comes to your professional league. And for the Boston Celtics this year in particular with Kyrie, the expectation was these young guys were so great a year ago that this was going to be the team that led the East all the way throughout. And because they didn't, criticism started mounting up.
I'm always fascinated by this. The Yankees are so hyper covered. You're so under a microscope at pretty much all times. How much conversation goes on about that? You had a guy like Derek Jeter, who's one of the great leaders that we've ever seen. How much do you talk about how you're going to handle circumstances when there is some controversy?
I think just as they pop up, you have little team meetings. This is how we're going to handle this. This is how we're going to handle this thing, different things that pop up. But you just have to be natural and go out and let the season kind of unfold and take its course.
And that's why it's great to have an actual franchise player that's legitimate. So when you're building a roster, you build around their weaknesses, because all players have them. Same with leadership. If you understand that your best player doesn't necessarily have to be the leader, then it becomes subgroups within the team that drive the narrative that you want to get accomplished.
And Greeny, I would tell you this. He could flat out play hoop. Because we grew up at the same time up in the Bay Area. He played against my high school the year after I graduated, but we all knew who he was, not only just as a baseball player, but he could flat out hoop as well.
What position was CeCe?
I was the power forward.
That doesn't surprise me. That was before the days of the stretch four.
Yes.
Way before those days. Basket kind of game.
Somebody else who can flat up hoop as we get up and go, James Harden with his third career playoff triple-double. The Rockets routed the Jazz again. Jalen, the Rockets look so good. Is this the best they've looked with Harden and the D'Antoni
It is,
era?
and I need to tell the world a secret. Lefties love when you force them right. Now, all of a sudden, you can go back to your left hand and finish on the left side of the hoop, in front of the hoop, or on the right side of the hoop. How about that? And so for James Harden, they're playing right into his hands. They're unlocking his offense. It's one thing to force him right. It's another thing to usher him right. And that's what they're doing, and now he looks unstoppable.
He loves it. The Bucks also taking a 2-0 series lead as they pulled away from the Pistons in the second half. Farnham, sweep here?
It's going to be a sweep, yes. And I would tell you that the one thing that stood out, we talk about Giannis, and he's phenomenal. But when Bledsoe and Middleton are playing the way that they're playing, this is a team that all of a sudden now you're going, okay, hey, the NBA Finals are in reach for this team. It's not just about the regular season. postseason, you need guys to step up around your star, and they have that right now.
We continue to get up and go with some football. And Friday, Russell Wilson and the Seahawks reached a 4-year, $140 million extension, making him the highest paid player in the NFL. Yesterday, Wilson spoke about how happy he is to be staying a Seahawk.
I'm just grateful for this opportunity. And when it came down to it, it was a no-brainer for me to want to be here in Seattle. And, I want to be a Seahawk for life. So that was kind of my mentality. And the guys that I've always admired in sports, the guys that play at those locations for 15, 20 years, guys like Derek Jeter, I want to be like that.
It's interesting to hear him say that. Kobe Bryant said something very similar to me when I interviewed him recently, that being on one franchise for his whole career was a really important part to him of his legacy. As I bring Adam Schefter into the conversation here, our insider. So, Shefty, we had all the Russell Wilson business in Seattle. That's now done. What is the next move for the Seahawks?
Well, listen, Greeny, they've got 4 picks in the draft 1 week from tonight, and any general manager wants a lot of picks, which Seattle doesn't have. So Seattle general manager John Schneider is expected to be active, is expected to look for additional picks, and the easiest way to get that would be to deal their franchise defensive end, Frank Clark. And I think people around the league think that there will be interest in him, and I think there are people who think that Seattle will be open to trading him to clear out more cap space to help accommodate Russell Wilson's contract extension, the one they want to get done for Bobby Wagner. And so Frank Clark, who's had 32 sacks the last 3 years, who brings great pressure, who's a coveted player, could bring more picks, and I think a lot of people wouldn't be surprised if he was traded by this time next week.
And listen, that's when we were going to hear all the people talking about, oh, you can't pay the quarterback so much and it winds up costing you the rest of your roster. We'll see. The other piece of business for you this morning, Shefty. So we talk all this time about the Cardinals. Are they going to take Kyler Murray #1? What does that mean for Josh Rosen? The Cardinals, as I'm sure you saw, release a video to promote their season schedule release, and Josh Rosen is not in the hype video. So what is going to happen with Rosen here?
Well, make of that what you will, but there were a number of players featured in that video, and you would think that the team would want to promote the quarterback it drafted in the first round last year. It wasn't there. It's just the latest sign that tells you that sometime by the start of the draft, you would think that Arizona is going to look to move on from Josh Rosen. The interesting part is it doesn't seem as if talks have escalated, and you wonder when they'll make that move. But they've made no secret of the fact, at least we go back to what Cliff Kingsbury said last year, that he would take Kyler Murray with the first overall pick in the draft, which he now has. And so Kyler Murray is obviously the odds-on favorite to become the #1 pick. And if and when they take him to run Cliff Kingsbury's offense, what does happen to Josh Rosen? And I think it's interesting that in this draft, the biggest quarterback question might not be Kyler Murray or Dwayne Haskins or Daniel Jones or Drew Lock, but the biggest quarterback question in this draft might just be where Josh Rosen winds up.
I completely agree, Shefty. That's really well said. Thank you, my man. As I bring that to the desk, every time we have this conversation, I feel the need to also insert Josh Rosen costs a lot less money going forward than any of these guys you might take in the first round. He's an inexpensive option based upon where he is in his contract. And so, Dan Orlovsky, again, I will come back to you on this. What is the right place for Josh Rosen to find what I think a lot of people think he has the potential to be in the NFL?
The healthiest place for him to go to is the Los Angeles Chargers, because he gets to go back home. He's a California kid. He grew up there, loves to be part of that area. The Chargers have no expectation for him to play. He can go learn behind Phillip Rivers, who's one of the all-time great leaders. I said this before, Josh Rosen has never had a mentor, never had somebody ahead of him to show him, this is how you do things, this is how you handle success, this is how you handle that failure. He can go to the Chargers, learn from Phillip, settle in, have some structure around him and go, now you can really watch him develop. Because physically he's great, but we can watch his maturity develop.
CC, I've heard you talk about football a lot. The sport is changing right before our eyes. The NFL is becoming the Big 12. They're going to make, Kyler Murray is going to be the first pick in the draft. They're going to be flinging it around and running around. What do you make of all this?
I like it. I mean, I love, the offense. That makes me nervous, though, Josh Rosen going to the Chargers, because I'm a Raiders fan. So I don't want to see them get any better. I don't want to see them get any better, but.
Sorry to hear that, man.
But I like this new NFL. I enjoy it. I play a lot of fantasy football, so you want to see as many points scored as possible.
Hey, if Kyler Murray doesn't wind up going to Arizona, the place that people keep talking about is...
We've talked about a team that is a of the Raiders' nature that might be interested in trading up. The reason I've tied to him is like John Gruden. I just feel like you got to click on tape and be like, look at this guy. You know, like that's why I could see the Raiders.
But then what happens to Derek Carr? Like,
someone comes calling.
Gruden's not in love with Derek Carr.
No.
Yeah, we seen that last year.
Right.
And I thought they were going to trade him to the Giants.
Who would you rather have as a fan? Who would you rather have?
I love Derek Carr.
Okay, I like him too.
Carr. And I think that we need to give him, he got hurt, he broke his back, he had, the leg injury. I just want to see him develop and see, what he can really turn into, especially with AB.
The one thing about the Cardinals, I would say, is it's just starting to feel a little bit fishy. Like, is it too obvious here that they're going to go with Kyler Murray?